Crash course, what happens when an emperor is nothing but a figurehead? Before 1868, Japan was effectively run by the Tokugawa shogunate, named after Tokugawa Ieyasu, who took over the Japanese government for centuries before the Meiji Restoration. Tokugawa Ieyasu was a founder of the Tokugawa shogunate that ruled Japan from 1603 to 1868. A poetic yet powerful man, Ieyasu enjoyed falconry and was skilled in fencing, archery, and horsemanship. He had ideas about how valuable people were based on their jobs. These ideas were reflected in the Confucian hierarchy, which is relevant because merchants were all the way down at the bottom of the hierarchy. However, as plants tend to do when they are given very little wriggle room, the hierarchy began to fall apart. Samurais, once warriors at the near tippy top of the hierarchy, began not as civil servants. As time went on, they couldn't afford their status of living, and began to go into debt at the hands of, who guessed it? Merchants! As merchants grew more powerful, the status the shogunate tried so hard to enforce began to implode. Meanwhile, in the United States, demand to open new markets for manufactured goods and supply raw materials for the industrial industry was harsh. Born in Newport, Rhode Island in 1790, Matthew Calabraith Perry was a quite competent negotiator. He was known for making deals through jovial means, such as parties and other wholesome events. Perry came with a flight of steam vehicles to Japan's closed doorsteps. After Perry's first negotiations failed, he turned to less wholesome means to get to the isolationist Japan to open its gates. Because the United States forces had modern cannons and weapons, the negotiators quickly bombarded cities in Japan, overwhelming their less than modern samurais. As a response, the younger generation of Japanese people started spouting a new radical idea: Japanese spirit, Western technology. These ideals found their way into heads of quite powerful individuals. Some decided to go abroad and learn the secrets of Western civilization. The common people, afraid of the advanced Western weapons, campaigned hard for reform before they lost even more lives to fighting the West. Even China had fallen to these foreigners. All those forces caused the people to finally revolt. Terrorists on both sides committed countless assassinations, robbing the country of many prominent leaders and almost leading it to a blank slate. And finally, after a short civil war, the Meiji leaders took over the country's government. The emperor, before no more than a religious figurehead during the shogunate's long reign, was finally reinstalled as a real ruler. Well, a real ruler. Even now, Emperor Meiji was hardly the sacred and inviolable authority the Meiji rebels gassed him up to be. Emperor Meiji, born in 1852 with the name Moshito, was only around 15 years old when he was reinstated to the throne. The boy wasn't very impressive by himself, allegedly not even knowing how to ride a horse on his own. However, most of the actual governing was done by a small group of young samurai, an incredibly competent group. They are praised for their impressive farsight and leadership abilities. In the name of their emperor, the Meiji leaders started their new government. There are struggles, of course. No government can start up without their fair share of problems. The almost rushed way the Meiji leaders went about revolutionizing their country led to outcries from the people, who had to deal with harsh taxes and new regulations. Farms were heavily taxed to pay for new reforms, and children were taken from their families to work in the new army. Similarly, infighting between the leaders caused problems. In taking down the unfair and elitist Confucian hierarchy, the Meiji leaders stopped giving samurais extra money and rations. General Saijo, angry at their decision to cut the extra supplies, and disregarding him when he said he wanted to start a war with Korea in order to keep said samurais employed, tried to lay siege on the emperor's castle and start a war with his large army of traditional samurai. This was one of the biggest proofs of the Meiji superiority, and the true turning points of the Meiji Restoration. The huge army of incredibly well-trained, with years of practice, was taken down easily by the reformed foot soldiers of the Meiji emperors. Using modern techniques and modern weapons, the war was short and the winner clear. The Meiji Restoration is a clear example of what can happen when enough competent people work together to make a world not just for themselves, but for the people of their country. This is a story about how competence and amazing leadership can lead to making a poor, isolationist, unmodern country into the capital of innovation and one of the major players in the modern world. This was Elizabeth Proctor.